So sometimes the character comes first. In this case, it did not. It was actually landing on the law that was written in it was 1918 when this law actually came out, the Chamberlain-Conn Act, which became known as the American Plan. And for the book of Women of a Promiscuous Nature, set in 1941, that was a very specific reason for doing that. But there was this location that I landed on after having discovered the law of the American Plan. I landed on in Kinston, North Carolina, the State Industrial Farm Colony for women. And that's like an hour down the road from me, maybe a little more than that, but it's not that far. And the interesting part about this is that I was actually researching to write about reform schools for girls. I had just read The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead, which was outstanding. And I thought, I think I want to write something like that, but for girls. And I wouldn't have been the first author, to write about a reform school for girls, but the angle that I was looking for was, why did they end up there? And I thought, what about focusing on the backstory? And so I ended up discovering this other whole thing that's virtually unheard of, which is not only the Chamberlain-Conn Act, aka the American Plan, but this mass incarceration of women held without due process. It's just like during, this was at the beginning of World War II, and we were just not quite into it yet, but getting ready to get into it. And I thought about the Japanese Americans that were interned at these camps, because there was all this suspicion around them. Well, it was the same thing. So Ruth Foster was created to carry that story because she was kind of the every woman of that time frame. If she wanted to live outside the parameters of what society expected of her, then she would be looked at very suspiciously. Well, she may be immoral. She may be a degenerate. To be sure, she can't be normal if she's not focused on getting married and having a family. Living alone? No way. So that's how she came about. And she's loosely based on a real person. So that's the other thing. But I needed her, obviously, to sort of give me one of the characters to tell this story. And they all serve a purpose, which is, for me, sometimes that can be kind of challenging because I'll start writing a character and I'm thinking to myself, this character is kind of useless. I mean, they're just there as, are they just like a prop here? What, do I need to kill them? But Stella Temple, Dorothy Baker, I'll do Dorothy Baker. Dorothy Baker was absolutely necessary. She is the antagonist, one of the antagonists, the kind of the primary one in the story, since she has, her own individual chapters. She is there to reflect, again, probably another woman of the times. And completely opposite, though, of Ruth, because Ruth is just, she's an independent woman, independent-minded, sort of woman, living on her own, has her own job, that kind of thing. And Dorothy Baker, or Baker, as she's known in the book, is there to give the reader the perspective of somebody that believed in what she was doing. She honestly thought she was helping these women become a better part of society. She was there to straighten them out. And, I tried to create a character that was loosely based on some historic figures. So, there's some superintendents of the past that I was reading about. And that was the main thing that stuck out, is how much they believed in what they were doing and how they felt like these women should appreciate them. appreciate, yes, it's tough going through reform. And as a reformer, she was like a taskmaster. And she did a lot of really cruel things, and that is true to life as well. Those are historically factual instances in the book, which is kind of sad to say. But that's exactly the purpose that she served, to give that juxtaposition of Ruth, and how she was the every woman, so to speak, and then Dorothy Baker, the reformer, believing in what she's doing and thinking that it's for the good of society. They talk about, as writers, and you know this just as well as anybody, you're trying to get into the head of your character, and you're trying to maybe, be somewhat, the way, I think the main thing for me is I never want to sound like first of all, creating melodrama for the sake of having, something really exciting happen. And again, like I had mentioned before, this is primarily historically accurate, even down to the treatment and the punishments and the things that happened in the book. But for Ruth, and for me to portray her as best as I can, as realistic as I can, while sticking to fiction, obviously, I mean, I had to think really hard about what would really happen. How would somebody react to this? And the things that I thought about is that they would balk, but then there would be repercussions, just like you were saying. And then they would balk again, and they would conform. And it would just be this back and forth and sort of tedious way of interacting. But mainly, you get beaten down. I think in a situation like this, you just want your freedom, and you're going to do anything and everything it takes to get your freedom back. And sometimes I think you would, as I thought about myself in this situation, and I thought I would shut down. At some point, I would shut down, and I would just go through the motions. I'll tell you something that I thought about a lot while I was writing this is the movie Shawshank Redemption, and the character in there, Dufresne, I think was his name, and just how he dealt with the issues that he was confronted with. Some really bad things happened to him, and then how he would just kind of move on from it. And I thought about that movie a lot as I was writing this book. But yeah, I think you can tend to shut down, as an individual when you're put into those circumstances. So I really just tried to get into Ruth's head and think about, even myself, how I would react in a situation like that. To some degree, it's almost like they went through it, right? They went through it. And no matter what happens in the ending, if you get through it, you feel victorious. Even if nothing significant happens, even if maybe there's no sense of justice or something to that effect, as a person, I think about it like as somebody who maybe goes through incarceration, and they do their time and then they get out. And, did they learn something? Maybe. Do they feel triumphant because they got through it? Probably. So if nothing else, you could look at it like individuals who are getting through something and coming out on the other side of it.